Thank you. And I'm really grateful to be here with Reverend Liza. Um, I am brand new, well, not brand new to East Bay Church. I came right around the time that Reverend Dorica was beginning to start her ministry here. And so my first time hearing of the season, this season was during the times of prayer and meditation that were being led by the practitioners on Facebook. And I found it to be really important for me, especially as an organizer who does a lot of work um, to mobilize people, to educate people on issues, and to train people and how to engage the governmental structures that can actually make a difference. It's really important that we spend some time actually being the the change that we want to see in the world. Um, it might have been a coincidence, it might have been a mistake, but I was listening to the news on the way here this evening, and that was quite the experience. But I think that there's so much, especially in this political time, and we're going to talk more about this, to make us angry and agitated and disgruntled, that if we're not careful, that will become our, our vibrational state. And we'll see that begin to spill over into other areas of our lives, into our work with our families, our relationships. And so it's just so critical that as someone who is engaged regularly with politicians and government agencies, that I don't allow myself to become um, swept up into the storm, but I have to be the one who brings the energy that calms the storm. And so that's what this season means to me, is beginning to build in that practice, that discipline of keeping my own peace as I seek to bring justice into the world.
Thank you both. I have a question for each of you. And we can start with you, Reverend Liza. How do we, as citizens in our communities, global citizens, approach this present landscape in our human narrative and glean from its opportunities of growth to share and give love and be an open vessel for peace rather than settling into a place of despair?
First I want to acknowledge that despair is like a legitimate response to the world, right? Um, to me, despair is kind of a combination of grief and helplessness, hopelessness, right? I think it's important that we feel the grief, right? And that we do it in community and not in isolation. I just this afternoon watched the replay of a talk that Malkia Devich Cyril gave at Thrive on Sunday. And Malkia has a whole body of work around the parallels between grief and organizing. And that we can use our grief as a doorway, bringing people together from a shared experience and then getting activated by that, right? So the helplessness, hopelessness part then is kind of transmuted in that process. There's always something that we can do, always. Whether that is getting involved in an organization that we believe in the work that they do, whether that is extending care and kindness and bridging across the fracture lines of division and separation that are such a huge part of the dynamics that we face, or whether that is doing the deep spiritual work. Spiritual warrior is a thing, right? And it doesn't have to be one or the other, but we can listen for what is our calling in these times. Some days we're going to be able to do one set of things, and another day it may be all we can do to, get out of bed. Be compassionate with ourselves wherever we find ourselves, right? And seek out that connection with each other, because the only way through this is together.
Thank you. Chris.
I love it when you're on a panel and they take your answers. Um,
You go first next time.
no, it's fine. I mean, I can talk forever, so. I think that I agree with everything that Reverend Liza just shared. I think, yes, grief is so important. And how do we move through grief and know that the purpose of moving through grief is to actually move through it and to use it as an energy that we can transform and transmute into something productive and beautiful. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but it's repeating.
There's an echo.
You can share Chris's mic sounds better to the audience, they said. So you can share Chris's.
So we share mine? Okay, so we'll share this one. I think some other things that I would add is, I would say that, and I 100% agree that grief is so important. I think that despair, anxiety, and worry can be they can be very real, so it's important to acknowledge them, but they can be deceitful in their usefulness. What do I mean by that? Sometimes we can think that just by being worried about something, we can change it. And we almost feel like if things are going wrong and we're not worried, then there's something wrong with us. And that's actually not the truth. We have to really begin to analyze what productive can I do with this worry as opposed to just sitting and being worried. I think akin to that is, I would say, don't be afraid to name where you see justice and peace and nonviolence appearing in the world. Again, I think that when there is a set of circumstances, political events, an election that we disagree with, sometimes we're reluctant to even practice gratitude because we don't want to somehow signal that we're in agreement or in agreement with these superstructures that and these figures that we do disagree with. And I think that that's a huge mistake. I think in our work towards building the world that we want to see, we have to name it. Naming it has to be a discipline. I think we spend so much time naming what we don't want to see, and we see it repeated and over because we build that mental equivalence of what we don't want to see, and that's all we see. But if we begin to actually put this philosophy into practice and begin to name the things that we do want to see and actually acknowledge the ways that spirit is actually showing up in the world, that will actually have another creative force and another creative manifestation that we begin to see. And so I think that that is just so important, that we begin to believe this philosophy in every atmosphere of our life, including the political. I shared a couple months ago that it's more than just about getting a parking spot at Walmart. I want you to get a good parking spot at Walmart. I really do. But I also want to see a world where there's real peace, where everyone can live and thrive, where we don't have, where there's not a shortage of housing, but there's an abundance of housing, because I know that the truth is that we live in an abundant universe. Does anybody else believe that truth, or is it just me? So that's just, that's what I would say.
Thank you, Chris. In fact, that is the next question. You've already answered it in some ways, so maybe you will find more ways to expand. But another concern for folks is the fear of what can happen, what can be taken away. Coming from, as you said in an earlier conversation with me, a poverty mindset. What are some ways to move from a poverty mindset around these present conditions unfolding in our political landscape to one of empowerment and a deep knowing that all is well, regardless of everything or anything we hear or see. Do you want to go first?
I believe I did just share a lot about that, but I think it's a discipline. I think this is where our prayer and meditation really comes into effect, and I think that as I reflect on my first introduction into manifestation and how to begin to allow Spirit to move through me to create the world that I want, I think about what I learned through Abraham Hicks, who speaks a lot about contrast and how the contrast it comes and these are events or things or people that are manifesting that you don't like, that are bringing a lot of resistance in your vibration that you don't want to see. And as you think about contrast, you can either take it as an opportunity to despair in it, or you can see that it's just an opportunity for you to dream. That this is really an opportunity to really be clear about the world that we do want to see. This is our time to really clarify about the type of president that we want, the type of administration that we want to see, the type of world that we want to live in. And so really getting into that discipline, allowing ourselves to be both in prayer and meditation about our country, about our city, about our state government, those things are just so important for us as we begin to build and create this world. And for me, that's what I do before I begin talking to politicians and working with coworkers and organizing community and really bringing about the change that I want to see. Is I need to be clear about what I want to see so that I can communicate that vision, not just to the people, but to the universe, to the God that I believe is hearing, that is responding, the law that is always active in our life.
You know what comes to mind for me is a kind of double vision that we have to attend to the very real conditions that we and other humans and other life on this planet are facing, right? Very similar to what you were saying, Chris, not surprising, right? Not to spiritually bypass, right? And at the same time, to see beyond that, to know that those conditions don't define us individually, collectively, don't define our worlds. So to hold that both and, the creative tension of the both and. You know, Reverend E would always like say, you know, something told me, like one of God's other names is something. And so it's how do we stay connected to that something, right? Whether for you that something is God, whether it is the ancestors, whether it is nature, whether it is the community, but that thing that is larger than we are and larger than the conditions. So it becomes for me a question of my practice is how do I stay connected to that something? Sometimes it's a daily, sometimes it's a moment by moment, but it is a discipline of remembrance and connection, of opening to something larger that can not only shift my experience of the thing, but can provide strength, can provide inspiration, guidance, can allow me to engage the conditions of the world from a deeper place, right? So the version of me that is engaging whatever is before me is one that's rooted in something bigger, something deeper, something wiser, and something more powerful than just, you know, moi, right? So yeah, that's the ongoing practice. And not only is that the practice for us to navigate, but there is so much power available in that, right? Our impact can be exponentially expanded.
Thank you both. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm totally uplifted. Thank you. I have another question. This is actually the final question, and then maybe someone sitting in the audience has a question. If we find ourselves in a state of despair, how can we flip that energy into a transformational experience? And I know you've answered that in much of what you said, but I know each of you have more to add.
It really is what I was just talking about, yeah. Because of where we are and the philosophy that's in the room, right? I can talk about what I think of as the mystic approach. In Science of Mind, there is one life, capital O, capital L, right? That larger something that breathes through each of us, that expresses through each of us, and is infinitely beyond whatever we think of as us. Right? Not only can we draw all the things I mentioned, before, the inspiration, the power, the depth. I'm also a student of Brother Ishmael Tete. And Brother Tete offers very particular practices going through that mystic understanding of oneness. We can impact every other expression of that oneness, which is everything. Right? Dr. Howard Thurman talks about mystics as social activists. He says they go down underneath the thing. And at that level, this is not his words but mine, you shift the tectonic plates that underlie the structures of injustice. And Dr. Thurman says the whole thing comes crashing down. Right? We may not see it in our particular lifetime, but we're part of something so much larger than our lifespan, right? It began long before we got here. It's going to continue long after we leave. But what is our charge in our season to contribute to that transformational shift? Yeah, and I think we're at such a pivotal time. I know probably every generation thinks, this is a pivotal time. This is a time of prophecy that we are in. It's a time of both tremendous potential for destruction and harm, and also at the same time, there is tremendous possibility for transformation and liberation. So, like Chris was saying, I feel like if I'm worrying, I'm doing something. Like that's my contribution, is worrying. That's leaning our powerful spiritual energy into the disaster. Again, not to deny the disaster, but where am I going to lean my powerful spiritual energy is into possibility, creation, the beloved community Dr. King talked about, which wasn't just, all nicey nice. It was about justice and dignity for everyone. So I want to lean with whatever years I have left. Kay and I are the same age, so we're very aware of that movement through time. And I'm so excited, tired and scared a lot, but also really excited for the possibilities that are inherent in this season on planet Earth. And to do my part, so when I leave here, I don't say, oh man, I wish I had like given more. I wish I had been more disciplined in my spiritual work. I wish I had reached out more, done, like whatever the thing is that you kind of know in your bones is yours to do, large, small, doesn't matter. But if you know it's yours to do, that's the discipline and the commitment. And to stay listening. Yeah.
Thank you. How do we move and transform despair? So I'm reminded of some advice that Dr. Michael Beckwith gave on his podcast around grief and acceptance. And so I just share it with you. So I found it to be really powerful in my own life. And this is some heavy-duty spiritual stuff, especially as we think about the political environment. And so I invite you just to brace yourselves. But the first step is forgiveness. And really begin to forgive the situation, forgive the people involved, forgive the politicians and all the crazy things that they're saying, forgive all those people who voted for the person that, or people that you didn't want to get into office. Like, real forgiveness is so critical as we think about shifting this dynamic. Again, it's unforgiveness is just a useless emotion. It's a useless leaning into the despair of our powerful energy. And so think about if you use all that energy that you're spending not forgiving and turning it around and actually putting it towards the world that we want to create. And what if we did that as a collective? And so forgiveness. The second piece is acceptance, radical acceptance. The election happened. There's nothing that we can do about it. We put in our best effort to do the things that we knew to do. We educated, we communicated with our friends and family. And it's important to accept it, not to allow violence or disrespect to continue into the future, but at least bring in some sense of acceptance so that you can truly be present. Because in your presence, that is where you have your power. It's in your presence where you have agency to really affect the situation. That's where God is. God is in the present. God isn't thinking about what happened in November. God is in the present. And so how do we meet God right here, right now? It's through acceptance. And then the last piece of advice that he offered, which I actually found to be really, really important, and I believe that there's a whole field of study around this, but he said to do a project. So take all this energy, any latent, so after you've done your forgiveness and acceptance work, take any latent energy and apply it to a project. I love to do things around gardening, and so anything that has to do with repotting of plants or planting things into the ground, those just seem to be really, really connective for me. But the project could be working with the social justice group that is actually bringing about change in the world. It could be phone banking. It could be educating your community members about what's coming up legislatively and how do we reach out to our politicians to make sure that justice is continuing to prevail. How do we as a nation navigate all the things that are happening around the budget right now, knowing that those things may have real negative impact on our communities. And so again, not just complaining about it, but what if we turn this church into an activist center in every single person who came, called their legislator, and said, this is important to me. Please do everything in your power to make sure that we have the funds that we need to reach out to our communities. So thinking about a project, something that's productive to do with the energy and not just leaning into the issue.
Wow. I'm sure we all said, wow. Now, are there any questions anyone might have of, yes?
Does this one work? We can let the audience pass this one.
question about forgiveness. You know, it rolls off the tongue so easily, particularly to those of us who have been in a New Thought church for decades. It's not that easy. I remember when I last met here on a Wednesday night was the night after the election, and I remember at that time being the one that was, oh, it's only 4 years, we'll get over it. And somehow, I haven't gotten over it yet. And as I see things roll out, because I watch the news, I don't want anything sneaking up on me, so I watch the news to know what's going on, or read the news. Forgiveness is hard. I need a lesson in forgiveness. Can, between or among the three of you, say a few words about how do I build that forgiveness muscle so that I can do better with it? And thank you.
I love that you refer to it as a muscle, because I think of it that way too. And it's a process. It's not an event. It's not like there's a magic switch. You know, I laughed when you said, because I'm not over it yet. It was just 2 months ago. And the assault is amping up, right? You know, I think it's spiritual malpractice to expect people to get over something while the assault is ongoing. The question for me really at the core of forgiveness is the condition of my heart. If I'm holding a resentment, my heart is closed. And it not only limits my ability to forgive, but it limits my ability to love the people who I feel fondness for, but especially to love the people I don't feel fondness for. That's another muscle, right? So the practice of forgiveness is not for anybody out there. It is so that my heart can be open and pliable, which to me is a better instrument for doing the kind of heavy lifting that I was talking about in shifting the consciousness. Something that helps me is if I can understand why, what's behind the behavior that I'm called to forgive, whether it's a personal interaction or whether it is like we're seeing now, this just massive assault, right? It doesn't excuse the behavior, right? Forgiveness doesn't say, oh, it's okay. Forgiveness is maintaining my openness of heart, not only here, but in how I then engage, right? Example, looking at the world perspective. I had to work really hard to find compassion for our current president. Started, the first go-round. But when I look at him, I see a traumatized, spoiled brat. His behavior is such a huge expression of unhealed trauma. When I see that, it doesn't excuse the behavior or make me say, oh, well, see, I'm not with you on the it's just 4 years, because I think the level of damage is not just an inconvenient small period of time, But what it allows me to do is to have a different place in myself from which I engage in the social justice work, from which I engage in the spiritual work, right? To me, healing, Kay read my bio, and for me at this point, healing is central to justice. Because without healing, you might get change, but you won't get transformation. Right? I may never be able to reach Mr. Trump, but there are millions of people who are also traumatized and who resonate with him out of that trauma. Maybe we can reach some of them. Maybe we can shift the tide of collective consciousness in this country so that all these millions of people who are really acting outside their own preservation and that of their, I mean, where are you going to get air and water if you destroy it? Yelling my truth is not going to convince anybody, but listening and compassionate, trying to understand where the wound is, we can then address the wound. And that's what brings the awakening. That's what brings the shift. Now, when I look at the magnitude, you know, it seems like chipping away with like a toothpick, you know, at a mountain. But none of us is doing it alone. Right? Each of us has our point of entry. And there are, I say, ancestors and yet to be born generations who are in the struggle along with us. And again, I know I may not see it in my lifetime, but that doesn't allow me to desist from doing my part. I'm going to be preaching on this. I'll keep going. Let me pass the mic.
I just,
Thank you for the question.
yeah. Reverend Liza, I want to thank you so much for adding so much good language around what forgiveness means. I don't want to sit up here and sound like I am the forgiveness expert, because I'm not. For me, sometimes forgiveness is an act of faith. You know, forgiveness is naming it as something that I want to live and embody, but then also the process of recognizing where I am, and then also recognizing when it's time for me to continue to shift more into that reality. And so forgiveness for me is a process of continuing forgiveness for myself and self-compassion on my own journey, because I know I'm working through my own trauma, right? As well, we're all working through trauma, and we're all being triggered. And so I just wanted to name and acknowledge and appreciate your question, because we're all on our journey towards forgiveness and acceptance, and that journey and that self-compassion piece are just so important as we begin to work on the condition of our heart.
I just want to add a resource, you know, a bit of a resource queen. There's a book by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and his daughter, Reverend Mfotutu, about the fourfold path of forgiveness. And they break it down in, I think, a really accessible way. So I highly recommend. It's not a big book, but you know, how did they navigate the truth and reconciliation work in the aftermath of apartheid South Africa? Like, you got to have some big muscles for that. So I would encourage you to pick that book up. Mm-hmm. And somebody, you want that? Were you reaching for it?
Do we have one more question?
I'm checking online now. I think it's, can you clarify when the season of peace and nonviolence begins, and how can someone get involved? I know the dates because you said the assassination of East, but just to clarify.
Yes, thank you for that question. Well, the season actually starts on the 30th, and then it culminates on the 4th of April. And as Reverend Liza said, it, in that time frame, which is 64 days, here at East Bay, we have several ways that you can get involved. Their morning prayer and the meditation will be using the principles of the day and weaving that into the prayer and meditation. We will also be reading the principles on Sunday. There also will be conversations after the power hour on Wednesday evenings, and anyone that attends, it's kind of an informal, wonderful group that just comes together, talks about the principle of the day, what that principle means to us, and then also when you go to the Association of Global New Thought, there is on their website, they have a lot of information, a lot of resources. They even have where you could practice the principles on a yearly basis. So that's another resource, and we'll be having those on our website as well. Also, we will have we'll have another event or two that we'll announce later. But I love to encourage people just to get the principles, and you can do the Peace Mandala on the Association of Global New Thought website, and go through the principles every day and read them, inculcate it into your meditation, your quiet time. And they also give you an opportunity for your own personal action. For instance, I remember last year, one that touched me deeply, and I kept doing it every day, was just smiling at people. And so I was just on a smile fest for 64, I still do it. I still do it because it just transforms my entire being. I could be moving through a challenge. I could be in the midst of some stressful busyness at work. I'm a union activist. I could be in the midst of something that is promoting change in some way, or even supporting someone going through a challenge. And if I just smile at the person and anyone that's around, it lifts my beingness, and it also affects others. So that's what is available if you use the principles every day during the season. And I say even beyond. We need not just a season for nonviolence, we need an entire beingness that goes on and on and on, and a presence in all of our lives of peace and nonviolence. Is there one more question? I think we have time for one more. Or a comment? Yes, Kimberly, do you want to use the mic? Or?
There's also a pledge that you can find on the website that is really, it has a lot of questions that you can answer, so you can make your own commitment to the Season for Peace and Nonviolence.
Thank you. I'm gonna invite you to hold on to that. I want to thank, huge thanks to these two amazing people, because it feels like, I feel like I'm sitting in my own living room and just having a conversation with them about what so many of us are thinking and feeling in our hearts at this time. So thank you very much. And I know Chris jumped on BART and zoomed over here on BART to be here with us, and you probably ran from the BART station. And Reverend Dr. Liza, thank you for being with us. I understand this is the first event you've done in person since COVID. So how blessed and we all are to be here and experience your wisdom and your spiritual discernment. And now I'd like to ask Kimberly if you would come up. She has something, and I'll let her talk about it.
Speaking of COVID. So in 2020, we, as part of our recognition of the season for peace and nonviolence, we identified spiritual leaders. And Reverend Liza was one of those people. So on March the 20th, we were going to present this to her in 2020. And that didn't happen. And then the pandemic happened. And so I am so delighted to present it to you finally 5 years later. So thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you so much. This is beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Very honored.
Thank you for all the work that you do. And now I'm going to invite Dr. Cynthia to come up and, yes, we can go back. Dr. Cynthia is going to come up and she is going to do our announcement and our offering.
Welcome, and thank you so much, Dr. Liza and Chris, for sharing your wisdom with us this evening and kicking off the season for peace and nonviolence. And so now we do the
Affirmation.
all right. So now we do our affirmation, and we are giving from that place of overflow. So now is the time for gracious giving. Let us come together in the consciousness of abundance as we align together as a community. And so ask yourself, what is mine to give in this moment? And let us affirm together. Our statement is, as I give thanks for the good now flowing into my life, I gladly share that good with others. The more I give, the more I receive. Amen. Oh, sorry. There are many ways for us to give. You can use the QR code, and you can also scan that as well as send it to Snail Mail, 4130 Telegraph Avenue. And you can go to our kiosk in the back as well as go to EBCRS and sign in there as well. Thank you. And now we're ready to have Al come forward.
Okay, I'd like to invite our newest minister of East Bay to the stage, Reverend Arlene. Reverend Arlene passed her panel this afternoon, and it is now official. We do not have to say soon to be, because she already corrected us a long time ago on the soon to be. And so I want to invite everybody to outstretch your hands to Reverend Arlene.
One request first, could you all shift over just slightly so you can be on camera, please?
We're not on screen. This one? There we are. Okay. So, Reverend Arlene, we see you. We know who you are. You are a beautiful beacon of peace. Love, light, and community. We love you. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for being who you are. And so it is. And so I'd like to invite Maria Antonietta up for our closing prayer. Thank you online for joining us. There's only one announcement. Revel Live this Friday at 6 o'clock here at East Bay, 4130 Telegram, Oakland, California.
Thank you. It's been a truly wonderful evening. I'm so glad I was here in the room where it's taking place. And for all of you who are still on camera, every month that has a fifth Wednesday, we plan to be here in person. So you may want to look through your calendar and add that. And with that, I'll just say thank you all for participating. I know that there is only one whole, perfect, and complete power for good in the universe. I know that this power is God. This power is good. This power is all that I need. In this power is incorporated all of us, all that we do, all that we are. I give thanks for this evening together in fellowship with my church community. I give thanks for our speakers and our panel. I give thanks for what they have shared with us tonight, but even more so, I give thanks for what they have done and continue to do with our community. I know that the work that they do just ripples throughout the universe. It has touched me, it is touching you, and it continues to touch our community. I give thanks for all of this, and I release this and let it go, knowing that it's rippling through us right now, and the world is better because we have been here tonight, and so it is. Do we turn off the cameras now, or do we?